Star Wars 7 by 7 episode 1857. Yesterday we talked about Rey's Jedi training and whether she's done with it or almost done with it and what she might have left to do. Well, let's consider the other side of the equation and talk about Kylo Ren and where he stands with his dark side training today. Let's go. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7 by 7. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. And you know, the difference between, well, there are a lot of differences between Rey and Ben Solo, aka Kylo Ren, as far as their training goes, well, and even beyond their training too. But as opposed to Rey, where the training that she's getting isn't just light side training, it is apparently Jedi-informed training, even with all the talk about the possibility that the phrase Skywalker and the way that it's used in the title, The Rise of Skywalker, right? Yeah, maybe that's a Ben Solo redemption thing. Maybe it's the new word for a Jedi. Who knows? But be that as it may, she certainly seems to be training in the Jedi fashion, whereas Kylo Ren is not necessarily training in the Sith fashion. He is just training within the dark side of the Force. And that's how he's talked about it in both The Force Awakens and in The Last Jedi. And he says, I've given everything to the dark side when he's talking to Supreme Leader Snoke. So yeah, not necessarily Sith. But the Sith, when you look at them from the training side of the house, certainly not in canon. And yeah, there are some things in Legends, but there's not anything really established as far as what Sith training really involves. Like, there's definitely no Sith Academy in canon, and that's because the Sith are operating in the shadows, and there have only been two of them based on, Darth Bane's The Rule of Two, because if there are three of them, then they all start getting feisty with each other and killing each other off. Not like that doesn't happen with a master and an apprentice anyway when it's the Rule of Two. In fact, it's almost expected that once the apprentice becomes so strong that he or she can take out his master or her master, then that's what the apprentice is expected to do. And if the apprentice succeeds, then great, that's the master now. And if not, then the master takes out that apprentice and says, well, I guess it's time for a new apprentice. And we saw a variation on that in the prequel trilogy where Darth Maul, didn't work out so well, and so Darth Tyrannus instead, who I wouldn't say really was an apprentice of Darth Sidious, right? It seemed like it was more like they were working together, and Dooku was already a Jedi Master to begin with, he was a Jedi Master because he was on the Council. So, yeah, he was not necessarily an apprentice of Sidious. I don't think that counts. But Sidious was certainly looking for a new apprentice after Darth Maul bit it. And along comes Anakin Skywalker and, he's got some ideas about that. But in the meantime, as we know from the Clone Wars cartoon series, Dooku took not one but two different apprentices. One was Asajj Ventress and the other was Savage Opress. I think that's how you pronounce it. Pronunciation was a little bit different from what you might expect. But the training methods are basically just general lightsaber combat and being a complete jerk, for lack of a better, right? Just ripping them up with Force lightning and beating them down and torturing them and so on and so forth. And this seems to be what constitutes Sith training. Well, it sure doesn't seem like it was much different for Kylo Ren, aka Ben Solo. I mean, you saw what Supreme Leader Snoke did to him in The Last Jedi when he was bested by a child, and Kylo got all mad at that, and Snoke just went zap and hit him with Force lightning, and Ben just went flying, and that was that. That's apparently how they play. But the abuse that Kylo Ren endured at the hands of Supreme Leader Snoke, it wasn't just physical, it was also emotional. And apparently it began at a relatively early age somehow. We still don't know yet how Snoke was able to start worming his way into Ben Solo's heart. But there was weakness based on the way that he was brought up by Han and Leia, and it sounds like there are abandonment issues and issues of self-worth compared to his famous parents and whatnot. And there was definitely, cracks in the armor that Snoke could take advantage of and pry open. So you consider that emotional abuse and how it developed over time and how he demonstrates that abuse in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi by ripping him over, how Rey took him out over and over again, and how the deed of killing Han Solo split him to the bone, and you're just a child in a mask and all this stuff. Like, the emotional abuse is still continuing. It's a very Sith thing to do, but I guess just generally speaking, a very dark side thing to do as well. And there are still a few unanswered questions, like, for example, how long had Ben been training with Luke before everything went so horribly awry and he took off? And we can guess roughly that it's 5 years, maybe a little bit less, in between when the Jedi Temple got trashed and when Kylo Ren went full-time into Supreme Leader Snoke's employ. So that's 5 years worth of dark side training, direct hands-on dark side training that he got at the hands of Supreme Leader Snoke. So it seems like Kylo has had a lot of Force training, comparatively speaking, but is it actually done? Well, I think we have an answer to that officially, and I'll talk about that after the break. Stay tuned. This episode is brought to you by Constant Contact, the premier email marketing solution for small businesses and organizations. I've used their service since 2003, and over the past decade and a half, I've watched them evolve, make the product simpler, more powerful, easy to use, and do everything that they can to help train people to use the product more effectively and for it to work with other forms of marketing like social media, for example. So check out sw7x7.com/email to learn more about Constant Contact and start a free trial. Once again, that is sw7x7.com/email for a free trial. Welcome back. So, the act of killing Rey was supposed to be the act that completed Kylo Ren's training. And yeah, okay, so he didn't kill Rey, right? That didn't happen. Does that mean that he didn't complete his training? Well, no, I don't think so. I think he actually did complete his training because he killed his master, which is exactly what a Sith would do. And a Sith, of course, being a dark side Force user, the dark side Force user is not necessarily a Sith, but a Sith is certainly a dark side Force user. Sith killing their masters. So, yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean dark side Force users have to kill their masters in order to be fully complete with their training. But if you're looking at it through a Sith point of view, then yes, Kylo Ren completed his training in The Last Jedi when he killed his master, Supreme Leader Snoke. And you can only imagine that in the intervening time between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, that he would have grown more powerful and more deeply committed to the dark side of the Force. And that is naturally going to make any redemption even more difficult, potentially. Or he's going to go further down the path, but it's going to split him even further, not just to the bone, as Supreme Leader Snoke put it, but spiritually as well, and might get to a point where it's just completely untenable for him. But certainly he would have to continue walking down the path of the dark side of the Force in order to get to that point to begin with. So yeah, I think his training is definitely complete, but hey, if you think it's not, let me know what you think, or let me know that you agree with me wherever you see this or listen to this, and there's a comment section for it, and if not, then at home base for the show at sw7x7.com. That is going to do it for today's episode of the show. Thank you so much for joining me for it, as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
This podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox. It is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other related Star Wars items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2019 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.